Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
Welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics, transmitting live from the Midwest Command Center here in Southeast Michigan through the Virgin Most Powerful Radio Network. We're going to talk about apologetics today, and it is the Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. So we're going to, get our workout. We're going to learn how to explain, defend the faith with confidence, clarity, charity, and hopefully a lot of fun. We're going to have a new guest. I think I mentioned this last program. Last week we had all-star lineup. I mean, every week's an all-star lineup, but especially my good friend Steve Ray. We had Father Robert Spitzer. We had Dr. Douglas Beaumont, Carlo Broussard. This week we're introducing you to some new people, some up-and-coming apologists. And today we're going to be talking with one who is Anthony Digmann, who is going to share with us kind of his story of journey of the faith and also his discovery of apologetics and his ministry. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Get to meet new people on the show. Also, we have our Finding the Fallacy, which is the ad hominem argument, and also the Meet the Early Church Father for today. We talked about Clement of Rome last episode. Well, we're going way back to the last of the early church fathers, John Damascene, or John of Damascus today. So you got the first, the last, and then we'll be covering every early church father in between. And as always, you are part of the program. So let me switch things around. I'm going to give my shout-outs to those watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. It's great to see familiar names. Thank you, Colin. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is for those watching live stream. Of course, you on radio don't see this, but yeah, whenever I look over here, this is the social media section of the dojo. You get to see the comments live, and usually there is a emoji explosion that goes on as well. Yeah, I should also mention last episode we had a caller with a great question, but unfortunately, fortunately, we were talking to Catholic Brian Mercer, and we were talking about evangelism, and the question was off topic, but it was a very good question. I really wanted to get to it, and I felt bad that we couldn't address it on the air because it would have just took us way too far afield. So I want to do that quickly right now before we jump into the Finding the Fallacy and so on. And that has to do, the problem was with, when I was mentioning about the biographical information about Pope St. Clement I, or Clement of Rome, I mentioned that there are some of the succession lists are a little different. Some place Clement as the third, and others place him as the fourth pope. And I believe it was Nate, if I remember correctly, was his name. And the comments section said that he wondered, does this undermine the idea of succession? And no, it doesn't, Nate, if you're listening. Basically, because the succession occurred, and we know it occurred, every list has the first pope as Linus, if you include the successor of Peter, counting that as the first pope. So everyone has Linus, and everybody has Evaristus. The question is, did Clement come before Cletus or Anacletus? Anacletus seems to be a different form of the name Cletus. So was he before or after Cletus? That's the only question in terms of the list. But every list agrees that the succession goes through those two individuals. And even that can be reconciled. And if memory serves me correctly, I believe it was Tertullian said that the episcopacy was offered to Clement, in which he, I think he took, but he resigned. And then Anacletus, or Cletus, took the episcopacy, the Bishop of Rome. And then when he was martyred, then Clement returned. And so that might account for why you have that discrepancy where some have Clementis before Cletus, some have them after Cletus. But either way, it doesn't affect apostolic succession at all. All right. Hey, look at all the emojis. All right. So with that, why don't we jump to our exercises, shall we? Yeah, thank you. You surprised me. I didn't expect to see the emoji explosion after the fact. And thanks, Rick. I really appreciate that. I like Brian as well. Finding the fallacy. Today's finding the fallacy is the ad hominem argument, which basically means to attack the man. This fallacy occurs when basically you shoot the messenger without addressing the message. In other words, they attack you personally, but they don't address why your arguments are wrong. Okay. So this is incredibly common, and especially on internet social media, where you might take a position, a Catholic position on social media, and people will start calling you names. People will start running down the church or something like that, but they don't address the issue. And so in a way, it's kind of like another fallacy known as the red herring. It's designed to throw you off track. So when this occurs, when somebody starts attacking you, what you do is you have to become like the Terminator and just be focused and just keep driving forward. Ignore the ad hominem argument. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that tactically, one of which I think is the best. And what you do, and this I did for years, and I think it was Trent Horn suggested, and it's like, oh, he does the same thing. Is absorb it. If someone says, if I say, Jesus established the Catholic Church, and someone says, Gary, you're tall, you're fat, and you're ignorant. Okay, so that's an ad hominem attack. I say, look, I'll grant you I'm tall. Okay, everybody knows that. And I'm probably fat, and yeah, I'm sure I'm ignorant. Nevertheless, what about the claim that Jesus established the church? See, what that does is you could even do it hypothetically. Let's say hypothetically I am tall, fat, and ignorant. Nevertheless, refocus it and say, what about this issue? Okay, and that's really the best way to get rid of that ad hominem. Because in a sense, you're showing them that the ad hominem that they're throwing out at you is irrelevant. It has nothing to do with the issue. So that's our finding the fallacy for today. Yes, that's the dojo instruction. A little tactical move there for you. So why don't we jump to Meet the Early Church Fathers section. And as always, every episode we talk about, get a little bit of information about all the different early church fathers, earliest Christian writings out there. And today is St. John Damascene. That's kind of an older name. He's also known as St. John of Damascus. He also has the title of the Golden Speaker. And he also is known as John Mansur. And Mansur, by the way, is his family name, which in Arabic means victorious. Now, although there's lots of biographies about St. John Damascus or St. John Damascene, not all of them are reliable, and it's a little hard to fix exactly when he died. The dates usually give him is approximately is born AD 645, died roughly around AD 749. He comes from a illustrious family. In fact, John's grandfather and father before him occupied ministerial posts in Damascus, first under the Byzantine rulers, and then after 636 under the Arab rulers of the city. John was educated by a certain man named Cosmas, who was probably a ransomed Sicilian captive, who was possibly also John's adopted brother. Not really sure. He had a thorough knowledge of Arabic and Greek and was proficient also in the knowledge of Islam. In fact, John himself served the Caliph government for a time, and he actually enjoyed a position of trust within that government until things changed and the Caliph Abd al-Malik came into power and was hostile towards Christianity. And so at year 700, John resigned his civil office along with Cosmas. And there, shortly after that, John was ordained by the Patriarch John V of Jerusalem. And so this was right before an outbreak of a great controversy known as iconoclasm. That's the cool thing about the early church fathers. You learn a lot about ancient heresies. So what is iconoclasm? Well, you can hear the word icon in it, and basically it's image smashing. That's what it's about. It's a belief that you're not to use images for religious purposes. And in fact, there's good evidence to suggest that this whole controversy about iconoclasm has to do with the influence of Islam, which is iconoclastic, in Eastern Christianity. John was a decided foe against the iconoclast. And he also was a very good and solid theologian in his own right. He was orthodox in his faith, and also his Christology was quite Chalcedonian. In other words, he was right in line with the church's teaching and counsel. Damascene was also a fluent speaker and a prolific writer. And we use Jurgen's Faith of the Early Fathers as our source for these segments. Jurgen says that he was really not super original in his writing, but nevertheless he excelled at synthesizing, and Jurgens puts in parentheses, often in a way that would be called plagiarism, and making the presentation of the faith in a style that would appeal to a broad audience. So, he was a holy thief like us apologists out there. We borrow and steal from the greats. Our arguments, it's if you come up with an original argument in apologetics, you got to be really careful, because if someone hasn't thought it up in the past 2,000 years, it very well might not be solid. Just my own little word of advice. Like I said, John knew Arabic and Syriac. He was very good at Greek as well. In fact, he seems to have written only in Greek. There's an enormous amount of manuscripts which testify to his popularity. And that's our early church father for today, St. John of Damascus, or St. John Damascene. Coming up on the other side break, we're going to chat with Anthony Digmann. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. 2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-on Apologetics. And we're talking about apologetics, defending, explaining, sharing the faith, and to tell us a little bit about himself and also about becoming a Catholic apologist. We have special guest Anthony Digmann join us. Anthony Digmann is a husband and father of a young family. He's also a Catholic speaker, author, and educator. He has appeared internationally on Catholic television, radio, such as EWTN and Radio Maria, He's the author of several books, including Using the Force, Star Wars and Catholicism, Demonology, Exorcism, and Holiness, and Sign of Contradiction, Contraception, Family Planning, and Catholicism. Anthony holds a master's degree in theology, and he serves professionally in Catholic schools, parishes, ministries. He's counsel in his own archdiocese. And Anthony Digmann, welcome to Hands-on Apologetics.
Hello, it's great to be with you.
Yeah, I've been excited to finally meet you. I ran across you on the internet, and I thought, wow, this guy has to come into the dojo and share his knowledge of apologetics.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's absolutely great to be here, and happy memorial of St. Boniface today.
Yes, indeed. Well, usually when we have a new guest on the show, I always ask them to kind of, give us the spiritual journey. So, were you always Catholic?
I was a cradle Catholic. My mother grew up a Missouri Synod Lutheran, but my father, he was also a cradle Catholic. And my parents, unfortunately, divorced when I was around 10 years old, around the third grade. My father never remarried, but he was sure to continue to raise my brother and I in the faith. And thanks be to God, my father actually went on and became a professed religious brother. He's now a Brother Craig Digmann with Glen Mary Home Missioners, serving in Appalachia in East Tennessee. And my one brother, thanks be to God, became a priest in our home Archdiocese of Dubuque in northeast Iowa. So I've been very blessed to see multiple vocations. My father is a brother, and my brother is a father, and I get the joys of living out married and family life and teaching and sharing the faith. So the three of us have had a great time with many blessings from God.
Yeah, boy, that must be fun introducing the family people. This is my father,
sure.
Brother and brother, father.
Exactly. They're great guys. I'm very blessed to have them in my life. But yeah, I grew up a cradle Catholic. I would say that I didn't take my faith super seriously until later into high school. And I attended, thanks be to God, a Catholic elementary school. I'm from a very rural area in Iowa, eastern Iowa, and we had an elementary school but didn't have a Catholic junior high or high school nearby. So I attended the public school. I got a good education there, but it definitely wasn't from a Catholic worldview by any means. So my values were, I would not say very Catholic. They were not ultra wholesome. They were pretty secular. So I started to see competition, or what I perceived to be competition, between my faith and science and the values of the world, morality, all of that kind of stuff. And when I got into my senior year is when it really started to come together for me, spiritually speaking. And it really, I understand that you can relate to this a little bit yourself, Gary. I dated a Baptist girl right before my senior year of high school, and she asked me some really penetrating questions, and I was just at an absolute loss for how to deal with those questions. And I remember coming home to my father and saying, Dad, I'm leaving the Catholic Church unless you can give me some evidence that it's real or it's true. And he did his best. Luckily, Dad had dated a lady who was part of, I believe it was United Church of Christ, and they had engaged in some discussions, and Dad had launched into some apologetics with her, and I had no idea what apologetics was as a teenager. But he had already dealt with a lot of the issues that my girlfriend had brought up. So he shared a lot of that with me. I'm very thankful for the work of especially Catholic Answers in San Diego. I think I need to credit them with keeping me Catholic largely, because I started to launch into studying the faith and bringing this back to my girlfriend and asking her questions, and that didn't go very well. So that relationship ended up ending fairly quickly. But it was a wonderful opportunity for me at 18 years old as a senior in high school to really explore what our faith is, why we really do what we do, and go from there. It was really outstanding.
Yeah, that's I don't want to say it's common, but you really don't appreciate the faith until you're challenged on it. Otherwise, it's so easy to take the faith for granted.
It is. That's so true. And as a senior in high school, teenagers have this tendency to experience some rebellion, which is, of course, necessary so that they will leave the nest and fly off, of course. But what I ended up finding is my rebelliousness shifted when I discovered the truth of my Catholic roots and just truth in general. And I noticed that my rebellion became less of a rebellion against my upbringing and my Catholic faith, and it started to become a rebellion against the world and against secularism, against the values that I had started to embrace as a teenager. So I was definitely a rebellious teenager, but from a Catholic viewpoint, it was a great rebellion. It was a rebellion against immorality and evil and not attending Mass, not having a spiritual life. But all of that stuff was very new to me. I, of course, prayed the rosary, and we went to church every Sunday, and we did the basic Catholic stuff that you do to be a practicing Catholic. But it wasn't in my heart. It really took until my senior year until God touched me at a retreat experience, and thanks be to God, through His grace, I opened myself to it and was willing to receive it and then take it and run with it. But I have to say, it wasn't all sunshine and roses right away, especially because I had a very strong commitment to the truth, and I felt concerned that since I was raised in Catholicism, that is what I would gravitate toward because that's what was comfortable. So I remember being 18 and committing to myself that, I really feel like I need to study everything that's out there. I need to look at all the world's religions, and I need to see, are there any of them that really have evidence? Are there any that really could be true? And if there are, I'm going to delve into those because every world religion has subsects and categories. And at that point, I would launch into those subsects and continue to explore from there. And in my exploration, admitting that there was a God was very easy for me, that I didn't have a lot of evidence for it. I believed that I felt God's presence, so that was pretty easy for me at that point. But struggling with what world religion was a little bit of a challenge at first. I found myself eventually finding my way into the Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, largely because I felt like Eastern religions are, of course, can involve a lot of wisdom, and as our catechism teaches, there is truth present in them, of course, in man searching for God and for truth, and that's what they do, largely as a wisdom religion. But what I felt was unique about the Western religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is at least these three are claiming that not only are we groping for truth and reaching for truth, but the God of the universe, our Father, has actually reached down to us and has shared this truth with us. And that was a claim that I found very, very interesting because that's pretty strong, and that's something that I was very attracted to. So I began to study Judaism, Christianity, and Islam more deeply. Eventually, this person of Jesus Christ was just, so compelling. How do you deal with this Jesus? Either he is who he says he is, or he's not. And there's so much evidence out there, and I really have to credit our Protestant brothers and sisters because they're doing such outstanding work in Christian apologetics, of course, right? Well, as Catholics, when we talk about apologetics, we usually mean talking about, Catholic versus Protestant apologetics and similarities and differences. But, Christian apologetics, what our evangelical brothers and sisters engage in, is often against secularism, against atheism, agnosticism, that kind of stuff, other world religions. And I really need to credit them because I was helped so much by their resources, books, testimonials of why Jesus really is who he says he is, and the credibility of that, the archaeological support, the historical support, and then found my way, thankfully, back into Christianity, and then, of course, launched into this, if I'm going to be Christian, which Christian denomination is true? Which, did Jesus actually start one of these? If you look back into history, where's the truth going to be? So that's what ended up, of course, apologetics, and I'm sure the audience is well familiar with Catholic apologetics, but, from then on, it just rolled right into Catholicism and falling in love with the faith that I grew up in.
Wow. So it wasn't like a one-time deal where you sat down with your dad and he gave a couple explanations and you're like, okay, I'm in. It was you really did a lot of digging and research.
Oh yeah. Well, and I must admit that I'm still far from sainthood, but I was very far from sainthood at 18. I
And
was
most people
very
are.
arrogant. Yeah, right. I mean, especially with my relationship with my father, and I love him. He's a wonderful man, very humble man, very down to earth, hardworking, hands-on kind of guy. And I'm a little bit different. I tended to gravitate more toward intellectual discussion, exploration, reading, those kinds of things, which we definitely had a great relationship. I loved my father at the time, but I was also really struggling with our differences at that age, which of course is natural, and that's good. But, I remember telling him, Dad, I'm leaving the Catholic Church unless you can show me that it's true. And I know that he gave me arguments, and I know that he gave me good thoughts, but at 18, I couldn't hear him. I just couldn't hear him. And he was speaking truth, but it wouldn't go into my brain because of my struggle with the personality difference and the intellectual difference there. So he was able to give me some things to read, and that's really what the Holy Spirit used to help light me up. And I would go back and say, okay, that was great, Dad. Here's what I like. Do you have any more? And he'd keep sharing tracts with me and books with me, and back then cassette tapes of Tim Staples and Scott Hahn and Steve Ray, all these people, and Janet Smith, and I was like, wow, every question that I was asking, not only did I think at first the church did not have a good answer to it, but the more I explored, the more I just fell in awe of the beauty of this bride of Jesus Christ, of his church, that she can answer all the questions that I have. She can answer them deeply, historically, biblically. It was just phenomenal. I literally fell in love with the bride of Christ at that point.
Yeah, beautiful. Boy, I hope Terry Barber's listening in, because St. Joseph Communications, you can't see it on the camera, but I have a bookshelf filled with all those cassettes, and I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's like once you get exposed to it as an adult, it's just like an entire new world opens up for you.
It was absolutely amazing. Yeah, St. Joseph Communication stuff is just fantastic. I've enjoyed their resources, Lighthouse Catholic Media resources, just so much great stuff out there with the Augustine Institute, Informed, and everything that we have today as apologists. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's another really good insight about teenage years, that you could flip that rebelliousness, attitude toward and direct it towards the proper good, defending the faith.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that I try to harness today because, as I went into college, I continued to explore my faith and became a very avid and active Catholic on campus. I attended a public college I guess I was on the 5-year plan back then and did a double major and a minor. But I spent one semester my junior year out at the Franciscan University of Steubenville. I call it my semester abroad. Still kind of close to home in the Midwest. It's probably not a lot of difference between Ohio and Iowa, but that was a wonderful experience for me because I was used to kind of being a big fish at this public college in Iowa, and heading out to Steubenville, I was just, run of the mill. There's a lot of passionate students out there who know their faith well, and things really lit up from there.
Very good. We're talking with Anthony Digmann about becoming a Catholic apologist. Stay tuned, everybody.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We are chatting with Master Apologist Anthony Digmann about becoming a Catholic apologist. And he's sharing his story about how he rediscovered his faith while being challenged in high school and doing research and kind of supercharged his faith. And so, Anthony, before we start, when you made that turn, when you started becoming interested in the faith and started combating secularism, what happened to your friends network? Were people, what did they make of you? Did they think you went crazy, or?
Yeah, great question, Gary. I would say it was more gradual than immediate for me because of that exploration, trying to look at all the world's religions and trying to discover who has real solid evidence for what they believe, and then all those subgroups of each world religion that I engaged with more deeply. So, it really took a fair amount of time. I would say I expected at the time that, this is going to take a decade, but really I was able to iron through it probably with the help of the Holy Spirit in maybe about 4 to 6 months. And in that process, I would say that it kind of honed down some of my friendships. There were a few friendships that just needed to go and just became acquaintances, and certainly nothing against those friendships, but there were a few friendships that really became more solid. And actually, I had one of the more powerful experiences of my entire life the summer before I headed off to college. I actually gathered together with a group of about 5 or 6 of my friends, and we had a couple of mutual friends, kids that we worked with, went to our high school, classmates who had left the faith during what was my senior year. There was also some juniors and sophomores in this club that we put together, but we were kind of frustrated by this, and some of us were leaving for college and weren't sure what to do. So I put this group together, and we met every Sunday night at my father's house after dinner time, probably around 7 p.m., and we would just hash through Catholic apologetic stuff for several hours. It would sometimes be 1 or 2 times it went to 3 a.m. before we split apart and headed home. And, we were working summer jobs, and I was playing summer baseball and all kinds of stuff. So, we were definitely busy. A lot of these kids were farm kids and had to get up at 5 a.m. to milk cows and all kinds of stuff. But, this group of us, 5, 6, 7 of us, we just asked the questions. And we didn't have the internet back then, certainly no smartphone. So I had the internet at my mother's house, but not at my father's house where the group was meeting. So I remember spending hundreds of dollars on Catholic tracts and books and tapes, cassette tapes, and we'd listen to a tape and we'd ask, why do we go to confession? It's so hard to admit my sins to another human being. Why do we do that? Is that really what Jesus had in mind? Where did that come from? Did the Catholic Church just invent that? Is that another human invention? So we'd ask these questions and we'd dig in together and we'd arrive at the answers together. And it really built this core group of really solid friends. And one of them, my best friend, is now teaching at a Catholic elementary school. His girlfriend at the time went on, and she's a religious sister serving over in England right now. So there's some great fruits that ended up coming from that core small group. That was just wonderful. So yeah, I would say it honed down some of the best friendships and allowed the Holy Spirit to work through those friendships to bring about even more fruit.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, I have similar. It's funny how there's lots of parallels between your story and mine. That I had small groups too, and yeah, that was part of the funnest part of my life. Although today is pretty fun too. It hasn't died down, but But man, just the close friendships and dealing with big issues and discovering things together. Yeah, that's exciting.
It is. That is wonderful. Right. So when I was in college and exploring, trying to look at vocation a little bit, what is God calling me to in my life? How does He want me to serve Him? The priesthood was definitely on my mind. I spent several years exploring that. I was also dating on and off the lady that I'm married to now, Stephanie. It's just God's blessed me so much having her in my life. And I ended up discerning eventually, it was late in my college experience, that I feel like God is really calling me to helping Catholics be Catholic. I didn't get into biblical studies, solidly enough that I felt comfortable working with our Protestant brothers and sisters and helping them see the faith, reaching out more in terms of that level of apologetics and evangelization. I really felt passionate about going after the Catholics who didn't know their faith very well, sharing my story with them and sharing the evidence that I discovered and the evidence that I continued to discover. Because I told my wife once when we were dating in college that, I'm absolutely committed to the truth. And yeah, I'm a passionate Catholic now, but if I ever feel like the truth is leading me somewhere else and I discover something else, I have to chase it. I have to chase it, which was a little nerve-wracking for her back then. But now that we've been married for 12-plus years, she feels pretty comfortable that the truth that we're committed to is the truth. And I'm not going to go running away on it. So that's been wonderful. But when I discovered that, I had to figure out am I going to plug in? Okay, so I could see why I felt a little bit of a call to the priesthood, because that specific vocation that I discovered is kind of similar to the priesthood. It can also lend itself to marriage and family life. But at the time I felt, well, maybe I'm supposed to be a college professor. So that's when I explored that avenue for a while. God kind of took me in a little bit of a different direction. And right out of college, I worked for a Catholic church, tried a few different things. But eventually I landed where I'm at now in my wife's hometown, actually, which is fantastic, in Dyersville, Iowa. They have this gorgeous basilica here that's, century plus old. It's just amazing in rural Iowa. And if you're familiar with the 1980s baseball movie, The Field of Dreams, with Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones, this is where they filmed it. So if you've seen
really?
That's where I live, is right in Dyersville, Iowa. And it's a very Catholic area. Dubuque County here with the Archdiocese of Dubuque is, especially in maybe a 5-county area, very Catholic, very committed. I would say that they didn't fall into some of the errors of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s that other parts of Catholicism in the country fell into, and they really kept their Catholic faith alive. There's what was lost with Vatican II in some parts of the country, the Catholic subculture, is still maintained here. And my wife and I were committed to raising our kids in this environment. It's certainly not perfect. There's definitely things that need to be worked on, and the Catholic subculture has its own challenges, but it's an amazing subculture to be part of. And they keep this Catholic high school in my wife's hometown alive. We have anywhere from 60 to 100 kids graduate every year, and I'm so blessed for the last 11 years now to be able to teach the seniors of that school. And in the spring, we do a course on apologetics where I get to take these kids and basically take them back to step one and explore their faith. What is the evidence for what we believe? Why? Because, they complain, we get taught the same thing every year, from kindergarten on, it's all the same. And what they don't realize is, the same thing happens with math. It's always numbers. But as you go along, you're getting deeper and deeper into those numbers. Same thing with your faith. Yeah, it's the sacraments again. Oh my, here we go. But we go deeper and deeper, hopefully, every year into that and unlock more truths. So senior year apologetics is something very different for them. They feel like it's where was this? Why didn't we get this when we were younger? But I tell them, I don't think I could teach you this when you were freshmen, because, they have that senior year, a little bit of rebelliousness. They're about to leave the school. So, they're willing to ask questions of their teacher that they wouldn't be willing to ask if they were just 16 years old and a sophomore or something like that. So I had started off teaching that course for maybe the first 2-3 years or so of my last 11 years at this Catholic high school. And a student who was just very bright young man, very much unconvinced of God's existence, let alone Christianity and Catholicism, asked me, Mr. Digmann, I know what you're trying to do here. I see where you're going, and I understand that, but I don't even know if I believe in God. I don't even know if I'm a Christian, if I believe in Jesus. So talking about all this Catholic apologetics, it's just not working for me. And I really took that to heart and tried to modify the course a little bit that year, but it was a little difficult to do when I already had the course set up. But years after that, I continued to model the course off of my students' questions. And I ended up taking this apologetics course really back to the roots. So when students come in, I say, look, you guys, you've been told since you were kindergarten or preschool or your parents, God exists and Jesus died on the cross and he rose again from the dead and God loves you and Catholicism is true and all this kind of stuff. But what evidence have you really had for this? And we have a great discussion about that. And then I launched them into, basically it's kind of a 3-part series, okay? Or maybe think of it like a trilogy, if you will. I'm a big fan of Star Wars. I wrote that book on Star Wars and Catholicism. I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. Trilogies are ultra popular in our culture right now. So think of it as a trilogy, okay? So the first step in the trilogy is, does God exist? Okay, what evidence do we have for God? And I found in talking to teenagers, especially these seniors, these 18-year-olds, that you really have to deal with the question of science and religion first. And that's a really key core part of dealing with does God exist. So you first have to show that science and religion are not opposed to each other, that they work together absolutely beautifully, that God is truth, he's the source of all truth, and both what we can discover from human reason and the sciences and what we know from our faith, what God has revealed to us, they cannot conflict with one another. And if there is an apparent conflict between them, then we need to figure out what are we doing wrong. It's not God that's doing it wrong. So we explore science and religion, the relationship between science and religion. Then we can tackle that evidence for God's existence. And we do a lot with philosophy. We do a fair amount of exploring other worldviews and that kind of stuff in that talk area and that unit that we go through. One I feel comfortable with, okay, they seem like they're pretty solid on some of these arguments for God's existence. Then I launch them into Act 2, if you will, and that is evidence for Christianity. Now, this all hinges around the person of Jesus Christ, because either Jesus is who he says he is, and it's true, or he's not, and all the other world religions might be right, or what have you. So, but the catch here that I learned is I started launching into Christian apologetics, and I missed the Bible. Okay, that was a big problem for me, because students could ask me, well, Mr. Digmann, you're talking about all this stuff related to Jesus and what he did and what he said, but how do we even know that Jesus was a real historical person? I mean, is there any archaeology or any historians that actually back this up? Or is this all just our complete Christian bias? So what I ended up building in there was kind of a pre-unit on, is the Bible reliable as a historical document? Not talking about like a scientific textbook, certainly, right, which as Catholics, we don't read Genesis in that way, for example, like a fundamentalist Christian would, of course. But is it historically reliable? Can we trust what it says about Jesus? Did he really die on the cross? Did he really rise again from the dead? So we get into some archaeology and history and really start to unpack that.
Beautiful. Well, we're talking with Anthony Digmann about becoming a Catholic apologist. Stay tuned, folks. A lot more to come on the other side of the break.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. For those just joining the program, we are chatting with Anthony Digmann, master apologist, and he's sharing with us not only his journey of faith, but some outstanding work that he's doing in apologetics on a high school level. And if you want more information about Anthony, before I forget, his website, check this out. It's anthonydigmann.com. Digmann spelled D-I-G-M-A-N-N, anthonydigmann.com. Anthony, man, what an awesome course. Now, we're in the second act, Christian Apologetics. We're talking about that you work through the reliability of the New Testament, Jesus as a historical figure. Where do you move from there?
Absolutely. So that's kind of the prefiguring to launch into, is Christianity true? So it gives the kids an opportunity to say, am I really a Christian? Am I really going to commit to being a disciple of Jesus Christ and make him the most important figure in my life, make him truly my Lord? So after we talk about the reliability of the Bible, especially the New Testament, of course, then we can start to talk about Jesus. And our primary topic in talking about Jesus Christ is the resurrection, because St. Paul uses this as, if it didn't happen, if the resurrection isn't true, then our faith is in vain and our preaching is in vain. But if it is, then everything hinges on the resurrection, and the entire world changes. This is the most significant event in the history of humanity if it's actually true. So at that point, we launch into historical evidence, archaeological evidence for the resurrection. Because if we're going to be honest, Gary, and step back and look at the resurrection and pretend like we haven't heard it as cradle Christians or cradle Catholics for many, many years, it's a wild idea. This guy really came back from the dead, and that this supports everything that he's been teaching and preaching about himself. I mean, that's a wild idea, right, if you're hearing this for the first time. So we've got to be sympathetic to that when we're talking to people who don't share that worldview and haven't heard that. And I encourage my students to do this as well, is try to hear this for the first time. But when you look through the evidence for the resurrection, whether it actually happened or not, the resurrection is a wild idea. But to try to disprove the resurrection, based on what we know, historically speaking, it becomes even more wild. It becomes even more unbelievable that this would be made up, for example, than that the resurrection actually happened. So it gives my students an opportunity to explore Christianity and make that commitment to Jesus Christ and hear things that they've never heard before. And then finally, Act 3 is Catholicism true? So we launch into the Catholic component and all the Catholic apologetics that many Catholics are very familiar with, but tend to be somewhat new to my students. So this whole course was so useful for my students. I realized, you know what? I talked to parents at parent-teacher conferences, and they'd ask, what are you guys studying this semester? And I'd give them a quick sum up, and they'd say, man, I wish I could be in there, hear some of that stuff. That'd be really, really great. So I decided, I did a little bit of writing at that point several years ago, a little bit of speaking in my local area at that point. So I decided to open it up a little bit more and offer, several talks. But one of the series is that I offer, got to do trilogies in 21st century, right? Is this trilogy talk, if you will, on, I call it Why God, Why Christian, Why Catholic? So it's evidence for what we believe using archaeology, philosophy, science, history, etc., exploring why do we believe in God, why be a Christian? Why be a Catholic? And most popularly, I offer that as a parish mission. But you could also do it as a workshop, possibly as a retreat. You could do it in a day. I've done it in a day before, and it's great. It can be a full morning, or you can split it up and do morning, afternoon. High schools, Catholic high schools, great fit for that. Or I do the talks individually as well. So just depending upon if people are looking at one of these specific topics, because as Catholics, I think we do a really great job with that Catholic apologetics component, which is really, really good. But I'm disappointed as Catholics that we don't do a great job dealing with, science and religion we're getting better with. And Father Spitzer is doing a fantastic job with that topic, I think, in his Magis Institute. But more on, what evidence do we have for God? What evidence do we have for Christianity? The resurrection of Jesus? Is the Bible a reliable historical source? Those components kind of get missed out, I think, a lot in Catholic circles. So, I try to put the whole thing together, try to take it from start to finish, which works great with my students. I tell them I don't assume anything. Let's start from the bare bones, and let's see if we can build this thing. And for most of them, they're already there. They're already a committed Catholic. They believe, and this just gives them, it really solidifies that foundation for them. And some of them who are more skeptical, sometimes it brings them along. Sometimes they're just not ready, and we got to accept where the Holy Spirit's at. So it's really a blessing to be able to offer that, not only for my students, but to be able to take my experiences in it, things with my students, and the questions that they ask, and the way that they've honed that class and honed that material, and take it to a broader audience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I tell you, that should be, to my mind, that should be universal part of Catholic curriculum, is they have at least one course, if not several courses, in apologetics. I wish we could clone you and send you all over. So why do you think that, I know here in Michigan that a lot of parishes, especially in high schools, are starting to adopt apologetic classes, at least as like extracurricular activity. But why do you think it's not more integrated into the Catholic education system?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just touching on the Catholic education system in our country, if you go back to the mid-2000s, that first decade of the 21st century, the National Study of Youth and Religion that was done by Christian Smith, who's now a Catholic, converted to the faith, and he's now at Notre Dame as a sociologist, they really found that Catholic youth are really struggling and really need apologetics deeply, right? And that a lot of what youth have to say about what they believe is from their parents, from their home life. So we've got this generation above them, and this was almost 20 years ago now, this generation above them who didn't know their faith well, and they need the apologetics. So the U.S. bishops were really struggling with, what do we do with this? And from my point of view as a Catholic educator, what I saw is the bishops said to the Catholic publishers, hey, we've really got to provide some meat and potatoes here in terms of the resources we have. And we as bishops, we're not going to approve the textbooks unless these are solid and they're really dealing with what our young people need to know. And the publishers turned back to the bishops and said, hey, you got to give us an outline, help us put our curriculum together. So the U.S. bishops put together what's called the Bishops' Curriculum Framework, and they lay out, these are the courses that need to be taught in Catholic high schools across the United States of America, and there's some flexibility related to them. There's 6 core courses and 5 elective courses. There's not really one on apologetics, but here's what the bishops in their wisdom did put into the Bishop's Curriculum Framework. They worked apologetics into every single year. Every single class has an end component where there's a real Q&A component, for lack of a better word, for that subject. So, for example, sacraments. Why do we go to confession to a priest? Is the Blessed Sacrament really Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity? Why? How do we know this? So the U.S. bishops were definitely privy to that, 15, 20 years ago, putting this together, and they made it part of their curriculum. Now, depending upon what resources a Catholic high school uses in terms of their textbooks. Maybe they have a theology teacher that puts things together on their own, which is largely what I do, or if they use a publisher, it's going to depend upon the quality of the source material that they bring in and what they explore with their students. But at minimum, the bishops are certainly aware of this, and they certainly built it in. So you're right, Gary, it should be there. In my experience, though, in education just in general. Like take a professor in college. If the professor isn't interested in studying a certain topic, they're just not going to go there. It's like our thank goodness as Catholics we follow liturgical schedule with our readings, and we hit a large variety of the Bible. But if you have a pastor in another denomination who really doesn't want to deal with a certain book of the Bible, they don't have to reference it. They don't have to preach on it. They don't have to look at it. So, you can have teachers in Catholic schools who just maybe they're not interested in apologetics or don't see the need for it, and they just might not touch it at all. So.
Yeah, very good. Well, I know there's probably people out there listening thinking, I would love to start at least as an extracurricular activity, apologetics thing for teens. And so you do these seminars, you do these talks, so that could be really a jump starter for such a program.
Absolutely. And what I find oftentimes, Gary, is that we oftentimes look at the youth as Catholics. And I think, and that's important, don't get me wrong, but I'm afraid that we overemphasize that to the point that we have a generation now of their parents and possibly even grandparents who've really missed out on some solid Catholic education. And this is a larger need, right? And I'm a Catholic educator in a Catholic high school, so I'm not trying to take away from the work we do with youth by any means, but I do know as a Catholic educator that if there's not fertile soil there with those young men and women, with their parents, with their grandparents, with their families, then whatever your parishes or Catholic schools might teach them, it might not go very far. Okay, sometimes I see kids, where they don't come from a very religious family, but they light up when they're in, my classes, and our Catholic school is a solid school. We've got great components in place, but sometimes we try to give them the best we can, and it just doesn't go anywhere. It's just not fertile soil. So that's why I like offering it as well for retreats, for parish missions, and letting it be open to more than just the youth. But certainly the youth are really important, and I love going in and talking to Catholic schools and stuff. But, the resources are out there. It's just a matter of pulling them all together and lighting the kids up.
Beautiful. Well, we only have a few seconds left. How can people get a hold of you to have you come and do a seminar?
Sure. Best way to get in touch with me is, like you referenced earlier, my website, AnthonyDigmann.com. That's Anthony, just like St. Anthony, Anthony, and then Digmann, Digmann, 2 N's, .com. And I've got my books are up there. I've got sample talks, a whole bunch of free resources, as well as a contact page to get a hold of me if I can be of assistance.
Well, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. God bless you and your station and all your listeners, Gary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's Anthony Digmann. And, he lives out where the Field of Dreams were filmed. And, ladies and gentlemen, that curriculum sounds like a Field of Dreams to me. So definitely look him up, AnthonyDigmann.com. Just Google it. If you forget how to spell it, it will come up. And it's a great resource. A lot of fun to have him on the show. And the fun continues here at the dojo tomorrow. Mark McNeil. He's not a new person, but we've had him on before. And he certainly is a veteran in terms of apologetics. He's going to come in and talk about integrating prayer and defending the faith. That's going to be a fascinating program. And then Friday, we are going to have Teresa Beam come on, who is a convert from Seventh-day Adventism. And that's going to be a fascinating topic as well. So we're going to hear about her journey from Seventh-day Adventism into Catholicism. And, man, it's like I said, it's the fastest hour in Catholic radio because the program's done. It's unbelievable. But you know what? The fun continues because coming up next, we have the dynamic duo of Catholic Talk, the Terry and Jesse Show, the show that started it all at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I'm Gary Machuda, and I hope you enjoyed the program. And also, it's time for me to shut down the Midwest Command Center, turn off the lights here. I hope everybody has a wonderful and blessed day. And remember, keep studying, learning about the faith, because it just never ends. The fun continues. God bless you, everybody. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.